At one of America's busiest airports, a single word, random, was enough to turn an ordinary security check into a tense confrontation. A word that sounds procedural, but for millions it carries a heavy history. The story began like this, with a moment that stopped the line, silenced the crowd, and revealed a truth no one expected. The camera sweeps across a long line of passengers waiting at the checkpoint. The sound of rolling suitcases clattering, announcements echoing from the loudspeakers, a baby crying, the hiss of coffee dripping from a vending machine. Everything was routine until a TSA officer in a pressed blue shirt, with a smirk on his face, raised his hand to stop a black woman approaching. She wore a dark business suit, her expression calm, hair neatly tied back, carrying only a boarding pass and a small case. "You. Step aside. Random check. Don't take it personal." The officer smirked as he spoke, his voice cutting through the crowd. A few people glanced over, some shrugged as if they had seen this before. The woman didn't react right away. She looked directly at him, eyes sharp, her breathing steady but controlled. In her mind, a thought whispered, "Stay calm. Not today. Just get through. Time is running." A tense rhythm swelled like a heartbeat. She didn't argue. She didn't explain. Slowly, with deliberate calm, she placed a black badge onto the tray. Under the sterile white lights of the airport ceiling, silver letters gleamed. Pentagon, Department of Defense. In that instant, silence swallowed the hall. The TSA officer froze, his smile cut in half. Passengers nearby held their breath. One woman gasped. Another murmured, "Pentagon?" The black woman stood tall, unshaken, her eyes burning cold. She didn't need to speak. The badge spoke for her. She was no ordinary passenger. She was America's top line of defense in cyberspace, the Pentagon's chief of cybersecurity, en route to stop a terrorist cyber attack already unfolding. And that morning, she had been reduced to a random. The screen fades to black, white text appears. TSA agent mocks black woman, froze when her Pentagon badge came out. A bass thunders once, then silence. She had woken before dawn. The sky outside her Arlington apartment was still dark, a quiet blue hovering over the city. The streets were silent, but her phone was alive with encrypted alerts. The mission was already underway. She slipped on her jacket, checked her documents once more, and whispered to herself, "San Francisco, just a few hours. They're counting on me." At the Pentagon only hours earlier, she had stood in a closed briefing room. The air was heavy. Screens across the wall flickered red with maps of the nation's power grid. Generals, analysts, senior officials sat around the table. One of them leaned forward, his voice sharp. "We are looking at a coordinated foreign intrusion. If they break through, entire hospitals, airports, whole cities could lose power. We've traced it to the West Coast. You need to be there in person. Today." She nodded, her face calm, but her thoughts racing. She had stopped attacks before, but this one was different. The timing was critical, and one mistake could mean millions in the dark. As she walked through the Pentagon halls, salutes followed her. She wasn't wearing a uniform, but her authority was clear. In the car ride to the airport, her phone buzzed again. A message from her deputy. "They've accelerated. Estimated breach in 20 hours. She closed her eyes. 20 hours. The flight had to leave on time. She had to be in San Francisco before nightfall. Stepping into the airport that morning, she blended in with the stream of travelers. To anyone watching, she was just another woman in a business suit with a carry-on bag. But in her pocket lay the clearance of a nation, the access codes to systems that could stop the attack. And in her mind, the constant ticking of a clock she couldn't silence. By the time she reached security, she thought of nothing but the mission. She rehearsed her first steps once she landed. The secure handoff, the encrypted servers, the emergency team waiting for her arrival. But in front of her stood a man with a badge of his own, one who thought the word random was harmless, one who had no idea who he had just stopped. The line moved slowly, passengers dropping belts, shoes, and laptops into gray trays. Conversations buzzed in low tones, the rhythm of a routine morning. She stepped forward when it was her turn, ready to pass quickly, her mind already at the mission ahead. Then the officer's hand shot out in front of her. "You. Step aside. Random screening." His voice was casual, dismissive, the kind of tone used 1,000 times a day. But there was something in the smirk, in the way his eyes lingered, that carried more than procedure. She paused, looked at him evenly. "Is there a problem?" The officer tilted his head, lips curling. "No problem. Just routine. Unless you'd like to make it one." He motioned to the secondary area, his tone light but laced with mockery. Behind her, the shuffle of shoes slowed. A man coughed. A woman sighed impatiently. Another muttered under her breath, "Here we go again." The black woman moved calmly, setting her bag on the table. Her hands were steady, her posture upright, yet her jaw tightened, just enough for anyone watching closely to notice. The officer barked louder now, as though performing for the line behind them. "Shoes off, laptop out, liquids in a separate bin. You people always bring too much drama." A ripple passed through the crowd. One woman's eyes widened at the remark. Another whispered to her husband, "Did he really just say that?" Phones were pulled out, discreetly angled. A few passengers leaned closer, sensing something was unfolding. The officer began rummaging through her bag with unnecessary force, lifting her documents, tapping her laptop against the table, smirking each time he looked up at her. She stood silent, breathing deeply, her expression giving nothing away. But inside, a clock was still ticking. Every minute wasted here was a minute the attack advanced. Every second lost was another second the country's defenses weakened, and all because of one man's arrogance hidden behind the word random. The TSA officer bent over, digging into her bag as if searching for a hidden crime. He lifted her laptop, tapped it loudly against the counter as if testing its weight, then dropped it hard onto the plastic tray. His voice rose, projecting for the entire line to hear. "Laptop out, shoes off, liquids separate. How many times do I have to say this? You people always make everything difficult." A wave of murmurs swept through the crowd. A woman gasped, eyes wide in shock. Another leaned to her companion, whispering, "Did he really just say that? That's discrimination." A few phones lifted quietly, cameras pointed forward. She stood still. Her hands rested on the inspection counter, fingers curling slightly. Her eyes locked on the officer treating her like a criminal. Her breath was steady but restrained, her mind repeating a single command, "Stay calm." The officer chuckled, shaking his head, voice dripping with mockery. "Maybe next time you should travel lighter, sweetheart." The line behind them fell silent. It was no longer procedure. It was humiliation, played out in public. An injustice unfolding before a crowd, with every witness watching. The woman no longer stayed silent. She lifted her head, her eyes cold, locking onto the officer who had tried to humiliate her. Her voice was low and firm, each word cutting through the air like a blade. "You just wasted my time, and today time is the one thing this country doesn't have." Slowly, she slipped her hand into her jacket pocket. Every eye followed the motion. 1 second, 2 seconds. Then she placed a sleek black badge onto the plastic tray with force. Under the harsh fluorescent lights, silver letters gleamed. Pentagon, Department of Defense. The entire room fell into silence. The TSA officer froze, his smirk dying halfway on his lips. He stared at the badge, then up at her, his eyes flashing with sudden panic. Behind them, a passenger whispered, "Pentagon?" Another muttered in disbelief, "She's government?" She stood steady, gaze unflinching. No explanation needed, no defense required. The badge spoke louder than words. She was not some anonymous traveler. She was the nation's chief defender in a war most could not see, a war fought in cyberspace. And that morning, in the chaos of a crowded airport, she had been reduced to a single word: random. The TSA officer stammered, his eyes darting, sweat beginning to gather on his forehead. Ma'am, I didn't mean, it was just procedure. His voice trembled, stripped of the arrogance it once carried. She stared at him, her tone steady, cold, precise. You just put this nation at greater risk. I am not an ordinary passenger. I am on my way to stop a cyber attack. And you've wasted precious minutes. The crowd around them stood in silence. No more murmurs, no more indifferent glances. Everyone felt they had just witnessed not only an act of prejudice, but a dangerous mistake. A voice rang out. Supervisor, now! A TSA manager rushed in, his face paling when he saw the badge on the tray. He immediately bowed his head. Our apologies, ma'am. We'll fix this at once. Please proceed directly to your gate. No further checks. But she answered firmly, her voice like steel. No special treatment. Just do your job right. Not only for me, for every passenger here. Respect is not a privilege, it's a duty. The noise of the airport fades, and the scene shifts to hours earlier inside a sealed briefing room at the Pentagon. The walls glowed with screens, maps of the national power grid flickering red, warning lights blinking like open wounds. The air was thick, heavy with urgency. An analyst pointed at the screen, his voice clipped and urgent. We're looking at a coordinated intrusion. If they breach the system, hospitals, airports, entire cities could go dark. This is no longer a warning, this is a countdown. A general leaned forward, pressing his palm flat against the table, eyes locked on her. We need you in San Francisco, on site, today. Not 1 minute late. She nodded, her face calm, though her eyes betrayed the weight she carried. In her mind, lines of code, vulnerabilities, cascading failures rushed forward like a flood. She knew exactly what was at stake. If they were too late, it wouldn't just be stolen data. It would be lives lost, chaos unleashed across the country. The sound fades back into the airport, the loudspeaker calling flights, the shuffle of impatient feet, the buzz of travelers. The black woman stood in line, but in her mind, one command still echoed from that war room. Not 1 minute late. The TSA manager bowed his head, his voice faltering with embarrassment. Ma'am, please allow us to escort you straight to the gate. No more checks. This was a serious mistake on our part. The woman met his gaze, her eyes still sharp as steel. She answered slowly, clearly. I don't need privilege. I need you and your team to do your job correctly. Today, you wasted my time, but tomorrow, if you treat an ordinary passenger like this, who will defend them? A heavy silence hung in the air. Then, unexpectedly, applause broke out from the line behind her. A passenger, the one recording on his phone, nodded at her. Another joined, and then another. The clapping spread like a ripple, not thunderous, not noisy, but steady, undeniable. It was recognition. It was accountability. Everyone had seen, and everyone understood. She picked up her badge, straightened her jacket, and walked through the checkpoint. She did not look back, did not say another word. The crowd's eyes followed her, and in them was respect and shame for what had just been allowed to happen. The plane rolled down the runway, morning sunlight spilling through the window onto her face. Inside the cabin, passengers settled into their seats while she opened her laptop, entering a long encrypted sequence like a ritual. Each keystroke flashed on the screen like the ticking of a countdown clock. The flight attendant's voice came over the speaker. Prepare for takeoff. Engines roared, the aircraft shuddered, and slowly lifted into the sky. In that moment, she closed her eyes, drawing in a deep breath. But her mind did not rest. Images from the Pentagon's digital map clung to her thoughts, red blinking nodes, circuits in alarm, streams of hostile data rushing like a flood. Once the plane leveled at cruising altitude, her device pinged with a secure message from her team. Next attack expected in 16 hours. Meet at San Francisco facility upon landing. She typed a single reply. On my way. Outside her window, the sky stretched vast and calm. But for her, every minute that passed was part of an invisible war. And every second wasted at that checkpoint weighed heavier now. A reminder that the mission she carried was larger than anyone in that airport could imagine. The plane descended into San Francisco at sunset, the city below glowing with countless lights. The woman stepped off the jet bridge, her phone buzzing with a secure message. "We're waiting. Proceed directly to the facility." She nodded and walked quickly into the escort vehicle waiting at the curb. Hours later, inside a sealed command room, dozens of experts crowded around glowing screens. When she entered, the room fell silent, then rose to their feet. No introductions were needed. They knew exactly who she was, the living shield standing between their country and a cyber attack unlike any before. They worked together, lines of code streaming across screens, hostile signals blocked one by one. The countdown ticked backward, minute by minute, second by second. Finally, stability returned. Red warnings faded from the maps. The threat was stopped. The city stayed lit. Millions slept soundly, unaware of the invisible battle fought to protect them. In that quiet moment, she remembered the smirk at the checkpoint, the sting of the word random. And she knew, not everyone carries a badge to prove their worth, but everyone deserves respect. The narrator's voice rose, deep and resolute. Every traveler carries a story. Some stories are greater than we imagine, and every careless word, every act of disrespect can trigger consequences beyond what we see. Today, prejudice collided with power, and justice answered. Respect is not a privilege, it is a duty. The screen darkened. White letters appeared against black. Respect is not optional. Justice is not random. Music swelled, thunderous and heavy, then faded into silence.